I can still feel that moment like it's happening right now. That sharp, sinking feeling in my chest when the world seems to tilt and everything you've built starts to crumble in silence. It was a Monday morning, nothing unusual about it. The same dull grey sky, the same rush of traffic, the same bitter taste of office coffee. I walked into work with my usual routine. Headphones in, coffee in hand, a half-tired smile plastered on my face. But that morning, something felt wrong, almost like the air itself was heavier. People were whispering in corners, glancing at me, and then quickly turning away, pretending they hadn't looked. There was an uneasiness in the air that I couldn't quite name. I brushed it off at first, trying to convince myself that I was overthinking. Maybe it was just another Monday. But when I reached my desk, I noticed a small group gathered around the big screen near the reception area. They were smiling, clapping even. Curious, I walked over, expecting some random company announcement or a new project update. And then I saw it. Right there, in bold letters on the company's official page, was a post that would change everything for me. Congratulations to our rising star, Daniel, for his incredible presentation that won us the biggest client of the year. Beneath the words was his photo, confident, proud, and standing beside our boss, shaking hands with the client. My stomach twisted as I stared at it. That presentation was mine. Every single slide, every word, every creative idea, I had poured my soul into it. I was the one who stayed up for nights, testing strategies, building mock-ups, writing every detail. I was the one who believed in it when no one else did. Yet, there it was. His name in the spotlight, his face being celebrated, while I stood there invisible, like a ghost in the story I had written. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the comments below the post. People were praising him. What a genius! Daniel's creativity is unmatched. This guy's going places. I wanted to laugh, or cry, or maybe both. It felt like a nightmare, one where you scream for someone to notice, but no one hears you. I sat back down at my desk, numb. The laughter from across the room rang in my ears, sharp and mocking. I could hear Daniel's voice, somewhere behind me, cheerful and loud, as if nothing in the world could touch him. My screen blurred for a second as my eyes watered, but I blinked it away. Crying wasn't going to fix anything. I tried to focus on work, pretending everything was normal, but my thoughts kept looping back to that post. My name, erased. My work, stolen. My effort, forgotten. And the worst part, no one even suspected it. They all believed he was the mastermind, the golden employee who had saved the company's image. I replayed every moment leading up to that day, how I had shared my drafts with him, trusting him as a teammate, how he had volunteered to finalize the presentation, because, as he said, he was good at public speaking. I remember being so relieved, thinking, finally, someone who values teamwork. I didn't realize then that I had just handed him my entire creation on a silver platter. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, some congratulating Daniel in the group chat, others gossiping about how he'd become the boss's new favorite. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. A mix of anger, humiliation, and disbelief churned inside me. It wasn't just about losing credit. It was about being betrayed by someone I trusted. For the rest of the day, I barely spoke. Every time someone mentioned his name, it felt like a jab to the chest. And yet, I smiled when people looked at me. That fake, polite smile that hides the storm behind it. Because what else could I do? If I said anything, it would sound like jealousy. No one would believe me. Daniel was too perfect in their eyes. When I finally left the office that evening, the sky had already turned dark. I remember walking down the street, feeling the cold wind hit my face, trying to calm the fire burning inside. I kept replaying the scene. The post. his smile, the applause, until it started to feel surreal. Was I overreacting? Was I wrong to feel this betrayed? But then I remembered every sleepless night, every idea I had tested, every bit of my energy poured into that project, and I knew, no, this wasn't just a mistake. It was theft. That night I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what had happened. The anger kept rising, twisting into determination. He had stolen something that didn't belong to him, but he had no idea what I was capable of. I wasn't the kind of person to explode in rage or cause a scene. My silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Because one thing I knew for sure, this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I wasn't going to let him enjoy the spotlight built on my hard work. I wasn't going to let him keep my recognition, my pride, my success. He might have fooled everyone else, but he wouldn't fool the truth. So I smiled to myself, not out of happiness, but out of quiet resolve. He took my work. He stole my credit, but he had no idea what was coming. He didn't know that betrayal has a way of waking up the part of you that refuses to be ignored, and that part of me had just opened its eyes. It started 3 months before the day everything collapsed. Back then, life felt like it was finally aligning. I was working at a small digital marketing firm, a place filled with ambition and caffeine, where ideas were currency and long nights were a badge of honor. Everyone there wanted to make a name for themselves, including me. We weren't a big agency, but we dreamed like one. There was this constant buzz in the air. Deadlines, brainstorming sessions, quiet rivalries, and loud laughter that masked exhaustion. Still, I loved it. It was where I believed my hard work would finally pay off. Then one afternoon, our manager called a meeting. She looked more excited than usual, holding a folder in her hand, like it contained treasure. We all gathered in the conference room, curious. She smiled and said the words that made everyone sit up straight. "We've been invited to pitch for a major client. If we win this, it'll be our biggest project yet." The room instantly filled with energy. People exchanged glances. You could almost feel the ambition bouncing off the walls. But then came the line that shifted everything. "Whoever leads this project to success will be strongly considered for the upcoming promotion." That sentence hung in the air like a spark before an explosion. Suddenly, everyone was smiling, but the kind of smile that hides calculation. For me, it wasn't just about a promotion. It was validation. I had spent years putting in quiet effort, staying behind the scenes while others took credit for small victories. This was my chance to step into the light, to finally prove that I was more than just dependable. I was exceptional. That's when Daniel entered the picture. My colleague, my supposed teammate. Daniel was the kind of guy who made an impression the moment he walked into a room. He was tall, confident, always dressed perfectly. His words flowed effortlessly. His laugh was loud and magnetic, and people naturally gravitated toward him. The bosses loved him. The clients trusted him. And me, I tolerated him. There was something about his charm that always felt rehearsed. He had this quiet arrogance, this hunger to win, even if it meant stepping over someone else. But I told myself I was imagining it. When our manager paired us together for the pitch, I didn't protest. "You and Daniel will make a great team," she said with a smile. I smiled back, though a small voice inside me whispered that maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Still, I wanted to believe in teamwork. When Daniel approached me afterward and said, "Let's make this project unforgettable," I agreed without hesitation. It was the start of something that would later haunt me. The first week, I threw myself into the project with everything I had. I spent hours analyzing the client's brand, studying their competitors, understanding their target audience. I built frameworks, collected data, and brainstormed creative strategies that could set us apart. I was obsessed. Every detail mattered. Daniel and I had frequent meetings, or at least I did. I would come with new ideas, concepts, and slides. He would listen attentively, nodding, saying things like, "That's genius," or "You really know how to connect with people." It felt nice to be appreciated. Or at least I thought it was appreciation. He'd always end our discussions with, "Don't worry, I'll handle the visuals and the final presentation part." It sounded reasonable. He was confident in front of clients, while I was more comfortable behind the work. It seemed like a fair split. I didn't realize then how dangerous blind trust could be. Nights blurred into mornings. I'd sit at my desk with empty coffee cups piling up beside me, adjusting slides, refining taglines, testing new campaign angles. I wanted it to be perfect, a pitch that no one could ignore. And as I worked, I shared everything with Daniel. I'd email him drafts, send screenshots, forward concept notes. Sometimes he didn't reply for hours, even days. When I'd ask, he'd casually say, "Sorry, been busy polishing things up on my end." I didn't question it. I was too focused on the bigger picture. After 2 weeks, I showed him the final concept. It was bold, innovative, and supported by strong data. Something fresh that balanced logic and emotion. He looked genuinely impressed. "This is brilliant," he said, smiling wide. "You've nailed it." His enthusiasm felt genuine, and for a moment I felt proud. Finally, I thought, this would be the project that changed everything. As the deadline approached, Daniel suggested that he take over the final version of the presentation since he was going to deliver it. "You've done the heavy lifting," he said smoothly. "Let me handle the polishing." I hesitated for a second, but agreed. I had no reason not to trust him. After all, we were partners, or so I believed. That final week, I worked quietly in the background, refining extra notes, preparing backup slides, making sure everything was ready. Daniel, meanwhile, was distant. He stopped checking in as often, saying he was finalizing the pitch design. I didn't think much of it. I assumed he was just as dedicated as I was. The night before the presentation, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing in my mind how it would go. The client's expressions, the applause, maybe even a handshake from our boss saying, "You've earned it." I was nervous, but hopeful. I sent Daniel one last message before midnight. "Good luck tomorrow. We've got this." He replied with a simple thumbs up emoji. Now that I think about it, that should have been the first sign something was wrong. While I was lying awake imagining success, Daniel was making his final move. He had copied every draft, every design file, every document with my name on it. Then, like a magician hiding his trick, he deleted my metadata, rebranded everything, and presented it as his own. I didn't know it then, but my so-called teammate had already written the script for my betrayal. I was still too busy believing that hard work always wins, that talent is enough to protect you. I had no idea that the person I thought was my collaborator was quietly sharpening the knife he'd soon drive into my back. If I had paid attention, I would have noticed the signs, the silence, the overconfidence, the way he avoided sharing his progress. But I was blind, buried in my own determination, and by the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. The setup was complete, and I was the one who had unknowingly built it for him, piece by piece. I couldn't get the sound of that applause out of my head. It haunted me, looping in the back of my mind like a broken record. I'd never felt humiliation so sharp, so public, so undeserved. Everyone was clapping for Daniel, standing, smiling, praising him for his genius. But all I could hear was the echo of my own silence. I remember staring down at my notes, my name scribbled in the corner, as if I needed proof that this project had once been mine. My body was there in that boardroom, but my spirit, it felt crushed. When the meeting ended, Daniel walked over to me like nothing had happened. "Great teamwork," he said with that smug little grin, his voice dripping with false warmth. I forced a nod, afraid that if I opened my mouth, anger would spill out like poison. My fingers clenched around the folder in my lap. The papers inside trembled, not from fear, but from the effort it took to hold myself together. The moment he walked away, my smile vanished. I knew something inside me had changed. Back at my desk, the whole office buzzed with excitement. People congratulated Daniel, showering him with compliments. I heard my co-workers talking about him near the break room. "He's amazing," one said. "We're lucky to have him." Lucky. That word made me sick. I had done the work, spent sleepless nights perfecting every detail, while he strutted around collecting the rewards. I stared at my computer screen, at the drafts I'd saved. The same drafts I'd shared with him under the illusion of teamwork. It all made sense now. Every time I sent him updates, he'd respond with vague compliments, never real feedback. He hadn't been collaborating. He'd been gathering ammunition. I opened the company's social media page later that day, and there it was. The post. A shiny photo of Daniel shaking hands with the client, captioned, "Proud of our rising star for his brilliant strategy that secured our biggest deal yet." My stomach twisted. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. Not in the caption. Not in the comments. Not even in a tiny thank you note. People were calling him a genius. They were writing things like, "Your creativity is unmatched," and "You're going places, Daniel." I wanted to scream the truth in the comments, to expose him right there. But I didn't. I just stared at that post until the words blurred. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. Everyone treated Daniel like a hero. Even our manager started asking for his insight in meetings. Insights he never had before. I sat quietly, taking notes, my expression neutral, but inside I was on fire. Each fake compliment, each bragging laugh he let out near my desk added fuel to that fire. One afternoon, as he passed by, he leaned down and whispered, "You'll get your turn." I met his eyes and smiled slightly. "I already did," I said, my voice calm. He didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. That evening, when the office emptied out, I stayed behind. I opened the project folder again and looked through every file, every timestamp. I found the original drafts, the idea sketches, the research summaries, all saved under my name, dated weeks before he'd ever touched them. Proof. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't letting him get away with it. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. I had trusted him. We'd shared late-night coffee runs, long brainstorming sessions, even personal stories. I'd thought we were friends. That's what made it worse. He hadn't just stolen my work. He'd used my trust as a tool. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's hidden behind a polite smile, a friendly tone, a "thanks for helping." And when it hits you, it doesn't just break your confidence. It breaks something deeper. The next few days, I observed him. I watched how he moved, how he spoke, how he played the part of the humble genius. He was good. I'll give him that. He knew how to charm people, how to take control of a room without looking arrogant. But arrogance always slips through the cracks eventually. It was in the way he bragged too casually, the way he corrected others just to show off. He was getting comfortable, and that was exactly what I wanted. At night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying every moment, from the day I shared my first draft to the instant the applause began. But somewhere between anger and exhaustion, an idea started forming. Not a rash, emotional reaction, a plan. Something strategic. Something that would not only reveal the truth, but make sure everyone saw exactly who Daniel really was. Revenge wasn't about yelling or confrontation. It was about control. The next morning, I walked into the office with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. I greeted Daniel cheerfully, even congratulated him again in front of others. The confusion on his face was priceless. He didn't know whether I was naive or playing a long game. I kept it that way. Let him think I'd moved on. Let him think he'd won. People like him make mistakes when they feel invincible. And I was going to be right there when he did. As the day went on, I noticed something. The client had requested some follow-up reports, data breakdowns, and performance analytics from the campaign. Daniel had no idea how to produce those. I did. I had built the framework, the algorithms, the entire data structure behind that project. He could steal my words, but not my knowledge. And soon enough, that gap between what he claimed to know and what he actually knew would start showing. That realization gave me a strange sense of calm. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt in control again. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to explode. I just needed to wait. I was patient, methodical. Everything he wasn't. Because real revenge isn't about immediate satisfaction. It's about timing. It's about letting your enemy build their own downfall, brick by brick, until all you have to do is step aside and watch it crumble. That night, as I packed up and left the office, I took one last look at Daniel's empty desk. His ego had grown so big that he couldn't even see the cracks forming under his feet. And I whispered to myself, "You think you've won, but this story isn't over." I wasn't the same person who walked into that boardroom days ago. Something inside me had shifted. From trust to clarity, from pain to purpose. He took credit for my work, but in doing so, he gave me something much more dangerous. A reason to fight back, a reason to expose him. And deep down, I knew his victory was only temporary. My revenge was just beginning. For a whole week, I tried to convince myself to stay quiet. I kept repeating in my head, "It's okay. People will figure it out. Truth always comes to light." But every time I said it, it sounded weaker, emptier. I'd sit at my desk pretending to work, pretending to be okay while inside. The resentment was eating me alive. I'd watch Daniel walk through the office, like he owned it. Confident, admired, shaking hands, getting compliments from the same people who used to look to me for ideas. I smiled when others smiled at him. But deep down, something inside me twisted tighter each day. Then came Friday morning, the announcement that finally broke me. Our manager gathered everyone in the main conference room, his voice buzzing with excitement. He started talking about leadership, dedication, and how the company needed visionaries who could take charge. My stomach sank before he even said the name. And then it happened. Congratulations to Daniel, our new project lead. The room erupted in applause. Daniel stepped forward, modest as ever, pretending to be surprised while his grin gave him away. He shook hands, accepted praise, and gave a little speech about teamwork and collaboration. Each word felt like a knife, twisting deeper. I clapped too, because what else could I do? Refusing to clap would only make me look bitter. So I smiled, and clapped, and died a little inside with each passing second. After the meeting, I walked straight out of the building. I didn't even grab my coat. The air outside felt cold and heavy, like it was pressing down on me. My heart was racing. I kept seeing his face in my head. The fake humility, the smug pride he tried to hide. He'd taken everything I'd worked for, and now he stood where I should have been standing. I made it home somehow, though I barely remembered the walk. When I finally sat down, the rage came in waves. I replayed every late night, every time I stayed back at the office, perfecting a slide, every time he'd smiled and said, "You're amazing at this stuff." I had shared everything with him. My ideas, my process, my trust. And he had used it all to climb higher. I tried to sleep that night, but my mind refused to shut off. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts looping endlessly. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that conference room again. The applause, the handshake, the betrayal. Around 3 a.m., I sat up, grabbed my laptop, and opened my work folders. I needed to see everything again to remind myself what I had done. I opened the original drafts, the ones I'd written months ago. There they were, all my notes, my charts, my plans. Untouched proof that this project had started with me. I clicked through version histories, saw my initials next to every change, every update. I checked the emails, the messages where I'd sent him ideas, the attachments I'd shared. Each timestamp was a record of my effort. Each file was a piece of my story. That's when it hit me like lightning. I had proof. Every single document, every conversation, every edit. All of it carried a digital fingerprint. The truth wasn't lost. It was sitting right in front of me, buried in plain sight. He hadn't erased me. He couldn't. Technology doesn't forget, and Daniel, in his arrogance, hadn't even thought to cover his tracks. I could almost hear his voice in my head, full of confidence. "Don't worry, I'll handle the slides." And I smiled bitterly because I finally saw the bigger picture. He'd built his entire reputation on my foundation, and all it would take to expose him was the evidence he helped create. I opened a blank folder and began collecting everything. I named it Truth. It felt symbolic, like reclaiming something that had been stolen from me. I went through old chats, pulled screenshots, saved attachments. I backed up the files to an external drive, double-checked every timestamp, and took notes on the timeline. Each document I added felt like a small victory. The more I worked, the calmer I became. The anger didn't vanish. It just hardened into focus. I didn't want to scream or confront him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. No, I was done reacting. It was time to act. By dawn, I sat there surrounded by files, evidence, and the faint glow of my laptop screen. My eyes were red, my body exhausted, but my mind was clear. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt powerful again. I realized silence had never been the noble choice. It had been fear disguised as patience. I'd been afraid of being labeled difficult or emotional. I'd been afraid of losing my job or being seen as jealous. But now, I saw it differently. Silence wasn't protecting me, it was protecting him. And that realization snapped something inside me. I decided then that I wasn't going to confront him at the office. That would be too easy for him to manipulate. He'd smile, talk circles around me, play innocent while everyone nodded along. I wasn't going to waste my truth on people too blind to see through his act. Instead, I would expose him on my own terms, in a way he couldn't control, deny, or twist. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. It would be public, undeniable, and unforgettable. I closed the laptop and stared at the faint reflection of my own face in the dark screen. I looked tired, yes, but beneath that exhaustion, I saw something else: determination. For weeks I'd been the victim of his deceit, but now I was stepping into something different. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had knowledge, I had proof, and I had purpose. I whispered to myself, "You wanted a game, Daniel. Fine, let's play." The room was silent except for the hum of the computer fan, but my mind was alive with movement. I wasn't planning revenge for revenge's sake. I was planning justice, poetic, precise, and inevitable. He thought my silence meant defeat. He thought I'd let it go, but he had no idea that silence was just the calm before the storm. That night marked the end of who I had been. The quiet, trusting worker who believed that good work spoke for itself. That version of me was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. He had taken my credit, my promotion, and my peace. But he had also given me something he could never take back. A reason to expose him, to make sure the truth came out for everyone to see. And as the sun began to rise outside my window, painting the sky in pale shades of orange and gold, I smiled to myself. I knew exactly what had to be done. The silence was over. I barely slept that week. Every night I sat in front of my laptop, piecing together what had happened, not just to remember it, but to weaponize it. I wasn't going to barge into the office and shout accusations. I wasn't going to look like the bitter employee crying over lost credit. No, I needed a plan. Something so airtight, so well calculated, that Daniel wouldn't even realize he was walking into it until it was too late. Revenge wasn't about rage anymore. It was about precision. The first step was evidence. Cold, hard digital proof. I combed through every corner of my computer. Drafts, project folders, chat archives, old emails. My desktop was soon covered with windows, each one another piece of the puzzle. I found the earliest concept notes I had written, time-stamped weeks before Daniel ever mentioned the campaign. There were brainstorming documents with my comments in the margins, strategy outlines written in my phrasing, and presentation drafts that showed my revisions in the document history. I even recovered screenshots of our late-night message exchanges, where he'd replied with his usual, "Love this idea," or "You're brilliant, this will impress the client." Each message that once felt like teamwork now looked like evidence of theft. Then I opened the final presentation file, the one Daniel had shown during the meeting. I right-clicked, opened Properties, and scrolled down to see the metadata. There it was, exactly what I hoped for. Created by, my name, last modified by, Danielle. I stared at that line for a long time. It was small, almost invisible to anyone else, but to me, it was everything. Proof that he hadn't built it. He had only polished it, stolen it, and presented it as his own. That single piece of data was worth more than 1,000 arguments. I compiled everything neatly. Screenshots, timestamps, file properties, email threads. I labeled folders with dates, arranged everything in chronological order, and backed it all up in multiple places. An encrypted drive, cloud storage, even a physical copy on a flash drive, I kept hidden in my wallet. If this was war, I was building my arsenal. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, methodical, and laser-focused. But evidence alone wasn't enough. The world didn't care about who was right. It cared about who controlled the narrative. I needed to tell my story in a way that looked professional, not personal. So I came up with something smarter. I'd create a case study. Not a rant, not an accusation, but a detailed breakdown of the campaign strategy, written like an expert analysis. It would sound objective, educational, even inspiring. And within that calm, factual tone, I would slip in the truth, the timeline, the process, the proof. Anyone who knew the project would instantly recognize whose hands had actually built it. I spent 2 nights building a fake website. Sleek, minimalistic, designed to look like a real marketing publication. I registered a domain name that sounded credible, created a logo, and added a few placeholder articles to make it seem active. Then I started writing my feature piece. Behind the success of the viral campaign, the real story. The title was innocent enough. The kind of headline professionals clicked out of curiosity. I wrote every word carefully, blending professionalism with precision. I described the campaign's birth, the research phase, the brainstorming, the evolution of the core idea. I embedded snippets of screenshots, each one chosen carefully to show my involvement without directly naming Daniel. I mentioned collaboration, where appropriate, but used time-stamped visuals that quietly exposed who had led the creative direction. Every paragraph was backed by data. I wanted readers to see that the person behind the idea wasn't the one who had stood on the stage. I didn't accuse anyone directly. I didn't need to. The truth was visible between the lines. When I finished, I read it over 3 times. It was perfect. Factual, subtle, undeniable. I created a new LinkedIn account under a professional alias, uploaded a neat profile photo, and connected it to the case study site. Then I posted the article. The caption was simple: a deep dive into one of this year's most successful digital campaigns. Real data, real lessons. I tagged the client company and shared it in 2 large marketing groups. No emotion, no drama, just another industry article. At first, nothing happened. A few likes, a couple of generic comments. Then, around noon the next day, I noticed the post's analytics spike. Someone from the client company had shared it internally. That's when it began to spread. By the evening, the post had hundreds of views, comments from marketing professionals, and quiet murmurs from people in my own office. The blog's traffic graph climbed like a heartbeat on caffeine. People loved the behind-the-scenes angle. They praised the insights, the research, the detailed planning. But the more they read, the more questions began to surface. Subtle, curious, dangerous questions. Wait, wasn't this campaign credited to Daniel from company name? One user asked in the comments. Interesting how the timelines match, another replied. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The internet was connecting the dots for me. By the next day, whispers had turned into conversations. The client reached out privately to our manager, asking about creative ownership. HR scheduled an emergency meeting. Daniel's confident smile started to fade in the halls. He tried to act normal, but his body language betrayed him. The darting eyes, the forced laugh, the tightening jaw. He knew. Somehow, he knew the storm was coming, but he couldn't prove where it had started. I watched it all quietly, just as he had once watched me being erased. But unlike him, I didn't need applause or revenge fueled by anger. I wanted justice served cold, clear, and undeniable. Every piece of evidence was out there now, preserved forever in a professional-looking article that the industry respected. He couldn't delete it. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't even confront me without exposing himself. That was the beauty of it. My revenge wasn't a shout. It was a whisper that echoed louder with every share, every view, every quiet conversation that began with, "Did you see that article?" I hadn't destroyed him. I'd simply handed him his own truth and let it unravel his reputation piece by piece. The morning started like any other, except for the constant buzzing of my phone. It vibrated so much it almost fell off the bedside table. At first, I thought it was just group chats or random notifications. But when I finally picked it up and saw the screen, I froze. My LinkedIn post, the article I'd written under a fake name, had exploded overnight. Hundreds of likes, dozens of reshares, comments from people I didn't even know. I scrolled through the flood of notifications, my heart racing faster with each one. Words like brilliant insight, eye-opening, and about time someone said this filled my feed. My quiet plan had turned into something much bigger than I expected. By mid-morning, the whispers had started. People across marketing communities were talking about it. They were discussing how often ideas get stolen, how employees are overshadowed by the louder ones who take credit. It wasn't just about me and Daniel anymore. It was a conversation about the whole industry, and buried within that conversation was the story of my stolen project, wrapped neatly in professionalism and truth. At first, it felt surreal. The same colleagues who used to scroll past my posts were now sharing my article like it was gospel. And though I hadn't named anyone, those who worked at our company didn't need names. They knew exactly who it was about. The timeline matched too perfectly. The campaign was unmistakable. By the time I got to the office, the air felt heavy, charged with silent gossip. Every conversation stopped when I walked by. Every screen seemed to flash away from something. People knew By noon, Daniel's name was being whispered in corners. Some people pretended not to notice the tension, but others couldn't help it. Do you think he really stole it? Maybe it's exaggerated. But the dates match, don't they? The curiosity was spreading faster than any rumor I'd ever seen. And the best part, I hadn't said a single word. The truth was unraveling on its own. I was halfway through answering emails when my phone buzzed again. This time, from the client company. The message was short, formal, and icy. We came across an article about the campaign. Can you clarify your team's creative contributions? My pulse spiked. The client had seen it. That was all I needed to know. Things were about to move fast. By evening, the inevitable happened. The subject line in my inbox read, "Emergency meeting, attendance required." My stomach twisted, not from fear, but from the electric anticipation of justice finally arriving. I gathered my laptop, the folder of evidence, the emails, and all the files I had prepared weeks ago. I was ready for this. The meeting room was packed when I arrived. HR, management, the project team. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Daniel sat on the far side, his perfect confidence replaced by a nervous, tight smile. He wouldn't look at me. His fingers tapped against the desk. The rhythm uneven, jittery. Our manager stood at the head of the table, face stern, voice steady. "We received a complaint regarding the ownership of recent project materials," he began. The room went dead silent. "We'll be reviewing everyone's contributions and drafts today." Daniel tried to laugh it off. The same rehearsed charm he always used. "This must be some kind of misunderstanding," he said. "It was a team project, and then you'll have no problem showing your drafts." HR interrupted. The calmness in her tone made it even worse for him. He hesitated, eyes darting toward his laptop. "I didn't save older versions," he said quietly. "We all worked on the final file together. You didn't think you'd need them." The manager asked flatly. The silence that followed felt like gravity pressing down on the room. Then the manager turned to me. "Do you have anything to show us?" I nodded once and plugged in my laptop. My hands were steady, my voice calm. "Yes, I do." The screen lit up on the projector. My drafts, my notes, my research, all neatly arranged. I opened email chains with dates, weeks before Daniel's supposed involvement. I showed metadata from the presentation file, clearly stating, "Created by my name, last modified by Daniel." I displayed chat logs where I had shared ideas, only for him to respond with, "Perfect. I'll handle the final slides." Everything aligned, timestamp by timestamp, like a story told in digital ink. The only sound in the room was the soft clicking of my mouse as I navigated through the evidence. HR leaned forward, taking notes. The manager's jaw tightened. Daniel sat frozen, pale, his mouth slightly open, but no words coming out. He knew there was no escape. Not from this. The truth was staring him in the face. Documented, dated, undeniable. When I finished, I closed my laptop and looked up. The silence was thick. The manager finally exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" he asked quietly, his tone no longer sharp, but almost disappointed. Not in me, but in himself for not seeing it sooner. I gave a small, calm smile. "Because I wanted the truth to speak for itself," I said. The manager nodded slowly, understanding more than I had expected. HR closed her folder and looked directly at Daniel. "We'll continue the internal review," she said. "But based on what we've seen, this is serious." Daniel said nothing. His face was blank, colorless. He looked smaller somehow, as if all that charm and confidence had been stripped away. He stood there in silence, while everyone else filed out of the room, avoiding his eyes. No one spoke to him. No one defended him. After the meeting, the office was quieter than usual. People moved carefully, their voices low, their eyes full of questions they didn't want to ask aloud. I went back to my desk, opened my email, and saw a new message from HR asking for copies of all the evidence. I sent it over calmly, without a second thought. It was done. That night, I sat by my window, the city lights reflecting on the glass. My phone buzzed again. Messages from coworkers saying things like, "I had no idea," "You handled that so well," and "You deserved better." I didn't reply to any of them. For the first time in a long while, I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to fight or shout or prove anything. The truth had done it for me. Quietly, powerfully, completely. And somewhere in another part of the city, I imagined Daniel staring at his screen, realizing that no matter how carefully you hide behind lies, the truth always finds its way to the surface. And when it does, it speaks louder than any stolen success ever could. The office felt different after Daniel's suspension, as if a weight had shifted, and everyone was quietly adjusting to the new air. The tension that once revolved around his name had dissolved into whispers, glances, and the kind of silence people use to distance themselves from a scandal. I didn't speak much during those days. I didn't need to. Everything that needed to happen had already begun unfolding. The truth had finally taken its rightful place, and Daniel's downfall was no longer in my hands. It was simply the natural consequence of his choices. Rumors circulated faster than any email ever could. Some said he had been fired. Others claimed he was negotiating a settlement. HR remained tight-lipped, but no one missed the message. His time at the company was over. His office, once full of movement and laughter, now sat empty. The blinds were closed. His nameplate was gone, and his desk had been cleared. It was strange to walk past it, this space that once symbolized everything I had wanted. For months, I had envied him sitting there, pretending to be the mastermind behind my work. Now it was just a hollow corner, collecting dust, a reminder of what deceit costs when it's exposed. The last time I saw him, he wasn't the man he used to be. Gone was the confident voice, the slick posture, the polished smile that charmed clients and fooled managers. He looked smaller somehow, like the world had shrunk around him. He walked into the office one morning to gather his belongings, and no one said a word. People avoided his eyes, afraid that even acknowledging him might stain their reputation. He carried a small box filled with framed certificates, notebooks, and the coffee mug he used to boast with. As he passed my desk, he hesitated. His eyes met mine briefly, a silent plea buried somewhere behind the guilt. I gave him nothing, not a word, not a nod. He didn't deserve closure from me. Later that evening, I received another message from him. "I never meant for it to go this far," it read. "It was just business. You know how things work here." I stared at the screen for a while, the glow of his words reflecting on my face. It was pathetic, how easily he reduced betrayal to business, how carelessly he justified his theft. I deleted the message without replying. He didn't understand, and he never would. You can't claim to respect someone's talent while stealing their work. You can't say, "It wasn't personal," when you take away something they built, from their soul. The irony of it all was that the same platform he used to build his fake reputation became the stage for his destruction. The internet has a funny way of remembering things. It never forgets, it just waits. That article I posted anonymously kept spreading like wildfire, shared in professional circles, used as an example in webinars, discussed in marketing groups. People debated the ethics of creative ownership, the dangers of corporate credit theft, the silent exploitation that happens behind closed doors. Some called me brave, others called me strategic. None of them knew my name, and I preferred it that way. I didn't need fame. I just needed the truth to breathe. But word has a way of traveling. Slowly, people began connecting the dots. My colleagues started treating me differently. More respect, more curiosity. The same manager who once dismissed my suggestions now sought my input. Clients started reaching out directly, bypassing team leads to ask for my insight. Then came the recruiters, each one offering a version of what Daniel had stolen from me. Recognition, opportunity, trust. We've been following your work. One message read, "We'd love to collaborate with the real creative mind behind the viral campaign." That phrase, real creative mind, stuck with me. It was proof that authenticity eventually finds its audience, no matter how hard others try to bury it. Meanwhile, Daniel's name became synonymous with failure. His reputation collapsed faster than anyone could have imagined. Every company he applied to knew about the scandal. The story had made its rounds. No one wanted to hire someone known for stealing credit. Even his friends distanced themselves, pretending they had never admired him. The same people who once praised him as a genius now whispered his name with disdain. That's the cruel poetry of exposure. Those who climb on lies always fall alone. I watched it all unfold with a strange calm. I didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. Revenge wasn't about watching him suffer. It was about reclaiming my peace, about knowing that justice had unfolded without me having to raise my voice. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. I no longer replayed the betrayal in my mind. I no longer questioned whether staying silent had been a mistake. Because in the end, silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It gave truth the time to gather strength. And when it finally spoke, it spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into something new. The company eventually offered me a promotion, the same role Daniel had taken from me. I accepted it with a quiet nod, not out of pride, but out of balance being restored. There was no grand announcement, no celebration post, no speech. I didn't need validation. The truth itself was enough of a reward. Every now and then, I'd stumble upon another article referencing the story. The anonymous marketer who exposed creative theft, they'd call me. I never claimed the title publicly, but inside, it reminded me that justice doesn't always roar. It often whispers, and when it does, it echoes longer than any lie. Daniel's empire crumbled, not because I destroyed it, but because it was built on foundations that couldn't last. Lies can carry you far, but they can't hold you up forever. Eventually, truth catches up, and when it does, it doesn't just expose, it erases. That's what happened to him. And as I walked through the office one last time, before moving on to my new position, I passed his old desk. The surface was bare, the chair empty, the nameplate gone. All that remained was a faint ring from his coffee mug. A small circular reminder that arrogance always leaves a stain behind. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but closure. The cycle was complete. He had taken what wasn't his, and in the end, lost everything that was. Some people call it karma. I call it the quiet balance of truth. A month after everything ended, I finally walked away from the company. Not in anger, not in defeat, but with quiet pride. It was a strange feeling, leaving the place that had once been my dream and my battlefield. The building looked the same. The people still rushed through the halls. But for me, everything had changed. I had changed. I wasn't that person anymore. The one who worked endlessly for someone else's recognition. I was walking out with my dignity, my proof, and a story that had reshaped me. The air outside felt different that day. For the first time in months, I wasn't suffocating. I could breathe again. Freelancing was something I'd always thought about in passing. The kind of maybe someday plan people talk about when they're too scared to take risks. But after what I'd lived through, fear didn't hold the same power. I'd already lost, been betrayed, been humiliated. There was nothing left to fear. So I started from scratch. Just me, my laptop, and the drive to rebuild. I offered marketing consultations to small businesses, local cafes, and startups. No fancy office, no big-name clients, no polished boardrooms, just authenticity. At first it was hard. Some days, I barely got any responses. Other days, clients wanted the impossible on a shoestring budget. But every project, no matter how small, carried my name. That mattered more than any paycheck. My name, my credit, my voice. It was mine again. Every time a client thanked me for my work, it hit differently. Because now, the praise was real. I wasn't standing in someone else's shadow or fighting for validation that should have been automatic. I was finally being seen. Daniel, on the other hand, had vanished from the professional world. Word travels fast in this industry, especially when credibility is destroyed. At first, his social media account stayed active, still decorated with old posts celebrating his fake success. But slowly they started disappearing. The posts were deleted one by one, as if he was trying to erase the past. The smiling photos, the self-congratulatory captions, the comments full of admiration, they all vanished. The man who once lived for attention had gone silent. His followers unfollowed. His name stopped appearing in industry updates. It was like he'd been erased. I should have felt satisfaction. I should have smiled at his downfall, the poetic justice of it all. But I didn't. Not exactly. What I felt instead was closure. Watching him fade from relevance didn't fill me with joy. It simply confirmed what I already knew. Truth always outlasts lies. I didn't need to hate him anymore. Hate was heavy, and I was done carrying it. One evening, as I worked late in my apartment, the city lights flickering through the window, I thought back to how it all began. The ambition, the long nights, the excitement of wanting to prove myself. It was all still there, but it had evolved. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was creating because I loved it, because it was mine. That was something Daniel never understood. He wanted success without effort, credit without creation. He wanted the applause, but not the process. That's why he lost. My freelance projects began gaining attention. A cafe I helped went viral for their creative campaign. A small fashion brand saw a surge in sales after applying my strategy. One client even told me, "You make marketing feel human." That line stayed with me. It reminded me why I started in the first place. To create something real. Slowly, word spread, and I started getting messages from other companies. People wanted to collaborate, to learn, to grow with me. Not because I was famous, but because I was authentic. Sometimes curiosity got the better of me, and I searched Daniel's name online. There wasn't much left to find. No active profiles, no projects, no public presence. Just traces of old news, articles about his downfall, discussions about ethical marketing, threads about workplace betrayal. He had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of how arrogance and dishonesty always collapse under their own weight. And while part of me felt pity, another part understood that it was exactly what he had chosen. Every lie he told had a price, and he'd finally paid it in full. Months passed, and I found myself happier than I'd been in years. I no longer woke up dreading the office, no longer forced smiles in meetings, no longer questioned my worth. My success now came from my work, not from how loud I could shout about it. I didn't need validation from titles or managers. I was building my own path, one quiet, consistent step at a time. Then one day, something unexpected happened. An article I wrote about creative integrity began circulating online. It wasn't meant to go viral. I had written it from the heart, reflecting on how creators should protect their ideas and stand up for their work. But people connected with it. The comments poured in. This hit home. I've been through this. Thank you for saying what so many of us feel. I didn't reveal my story, didn't name names, but I didn't have to. The message was enough. As I read those comments, I realized something. Revenge wasn't destruction. It was transformation. The goal was never to ruin someone else. The real victory was rising from what they tried to bury you under and building something beautiful. I didn't destroy Daniel. I simply stopped letting him own a piece of my story. I turned the pain he caused into purpose, and that's what made me stronger. Late one night, I opened the old folder on my laptop that held all the evidence, the drafts, the emails, the timestamps that had once been my weapon. I stared at them for a while, the proof that had once defined my rage. Then, with a deep breath, I selected them all and hit delete. Watching the files disappear felt symbolic, like closing a door that had been open too long. The sound of the trash bin emptying wasn't just digital, it was emotional. I didn't need them anymore. The truth had already done its job. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker below. My reflection looked back at me, not the broken version from months ago, but someone who had learned, endured, and risen. I smiled, not because I had won, but because I had healed. Daniel had vanished, his empire in ruins, but I was still here, stronger, wiser, free. I had built something honest out of the wreckage he left behind, and in that moment, I realized what true revenge really meant. Not destroying your enemy, but reclaiming yourself. My world had once fallen apart, but I rebuilt it, piece by piece, into something no one could ever take again. And this time it was mine, completely, unapologetically mine. Looking back at everything that happened, I've come to understand that betrayal doesn't just wound you, it reshapes you. It's not the act itself that leaves the deepest scar, but what it does to your sense of trust. You start to question your own judgment, wondering if you were blind, foolish, or simply too hopeful. It's like the ground beneath your feet suddenly cracks open, and you're left standing in the middle of uncertainty, unsure whether to ever trust again. I used to think betrayal was a reflection of my weakness, but now I know it reveals more about the betrayer's character than the betrayed one's naivety. When someone chooses deceit over honesty, it's not because you were too kind, it's because they were too cowardly. In those weeks after Daniel's downfall, I struggled to make sense of it all. I had exposed the truth, yes, and justice had been served, but I still felt hollow. I thought seeing him lose everything would bring satisfaction, but instead, it left me staring at the fragility of human ambition. The same man who once strutted through the office with arrogance was now invisible. Emails unanswered, LinkedIn profile silent. His carefully built image crumbled. Watching it unfold should have felt triumphant, but it didn't. It felt tragic. Because beneath the betrayal and manipulation, Daniel was still a person who had thrown away everything real for the illusion of success. And that, I realized, was punishment enough. Betrayal forces you to look inward. It pushes you to confront not only the pain, but also the uncomfortable truth that not everyone will share your values. Some people see collaboration as competition. Some see honesty as weakness. And some, like Daniel, will destroy trust just to stand taller, even if it's on the ruins of someone else's work. But here's the thing, what they build from deceit can never last. Lies are temporary structures. They crumble under the weight of truth. The downfall might take time, but it's inevitable. For a long time, I carried anger like armor. I told myself I was over it, but deep down, resentment still burned quietly. Every time someone mentioned his name, it reminded me of the betrayal. Every time I opened an old file, I could still see traces of the project that had started it all. But healing doesn't come from replaying the hurt. It comes from letting go. And letting go doesn't mean forgiving what was done. It means freeing yourself from the control it still has over you. When I finally stopped asking why and started focusing on what I could learn, everything began to change. I learned that silence can be more powerful than confrontation. When you stop arguing, stop proving, and simply let the truth breathe, it speaks louder than any words. People noticed. They saw who stood tall when everything fell apart and who vanished when the truth came out. That's the beauty of integrity. It doesn't need noise. It leaves its mark quietly, but permanently. I didn't have to destroy Daniel. His own actions did that for me. All I had to do was stay consistent, keep creating, and move forward with purpose. What betrayal really teaches you is endurance. It teaches you how to stand when the world tilts against you. It strips you bare, forcing you to rebuild your confidence from the ground up. When you come out the other side, you're not the same person. You're sharper, wiser, and more self-assured. You learn to trust differently, not less. You become more protective of your work, your ideas, and your peace. But you also learn that vulnerability isn't the enemy. The ability to trust again, even after being betrayed, is what truly makes you strong. As time passed, I began to see betrayal as a strange kind of gift. It revealed who was genuine and who was not. It forced me to refine my boundaries. It made me value authenticity more than applause. I started recognizing how rare it is to find people who create, not for fame, but for fulfillment. And I realized something I wish I'd known earlier. Your worth isn't determined by who praises you, but by the honesty of your work. Daniel could steal my campaign, but he couldn't steal the spark that created it. That spark was mine, and it would keep lighting new ideas long after his name had faded. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about reaching out to him, not to reconcile or reopen old wounds, but to tell him that I wasn't angry anymore. But I never did. Some things don't need closure through words. They find closure through peace. His silence became mine, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding. He was a lesson, not a chapter I wanted to reread. And in that quiet acceptance, I found something deeper than revenge: freedom. What betrayal ultimately teaches you is that justice doesn't always wear a dramatic face. Sometimes it looks like calm. It looks like peace. It looks like waking up every morning, doing what you love, and knowing that the truth stayed on your side. The best kind of victory is when you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You simply live, and your consistency becomes your proof. Now, when I think back on it all, I no longer see betrayal as an ending. It was a beginning. It stripped away illusion, revealed the reality of people, and forced me to grow in ways comfort never could. I no longer crave validation or fear being underestimated. I know what I'm capable of, and I know that talent, once proven, doesn't need permission to shine. People like Daniel can copy work, but they can't copy spirit. They can borrow brilliance, but not sustain it. And that's the final truth I've learned. You can steal someone's idea, their credit, even their spotlight, but not their essence. Talent, integrity, and authenticity, they're unstealable. They live in the quiet moments when no one's watching, in the persistence to create even after being wronged, in the courage to stand back up and keep building. That's the real legacy betrayal leaves behind. Not pain, but strength. And it's the kind of strength no one can take away.